The center of Tropical Storm Beta is right here where this black dot is. So the weather near the center is actually not that bad right now. Most of it is removed by great distances to the north and east. But let me show you what I have here. I put on the reconnaissance track, and on their first pass toward the center, they measured about basically 50-mile-per-hour winds right about there. And then on the next pass in this direction, they measured winds closer to 60 miles per hour, much closer to the center. So we are seeing verification that this is indeed a 60-mile-per-hour tropical storm, but it is being hampered by some wind shear right as we speak, with a trough right here, a little bit one, a subtle one, but it's there. There is a trough of low pressure aloft that is impacting it and allowing the asymmetry to sort of continue with Beta, as we've seen actually now for the last day or so, where most of the thunderstorms are here, yet the center of the system, actually rotation, is right about there. As long as it has that asymmetry, we are likely to not see this thing strengthen very quickly, and that's good news. But the problem is that we will likely see going forward the prolonged impacts from Louisiana all the way through Texas, with right now we're already seeing wind gusts of 20 to 30 miles per hour and plenty of rain on the coast. But here's why this thing slows down. We talked about the cone. Melissa showed that. It kind of looks weird because this thing slows down and gets divorced from the main jet stream that could push it out of the way. And instead, if you look at this, let's say Monday morning, let's say this model's right, and it's probably pretty close. Beta is somewhere here in the Western Gulf, if not close to the Texas coast. But the main winds are way up here, and we're left with a relatively weak steering flow over the Gulf. That's not good, because it doesn't move much, and it keeps the weather in place with rain and wind and coastal flooding, potentially all the way through Tuesday. But it's by then that we start to see some westerly wind come on board and then begin to move this thing farther to the east. That would be good news. But Paul, until then, heavy rain is probably going to be the biggest story, with flooding potential along the way. Back to you.
Yeah, definitely a big concern there for Texas. Also at the coast, we got flood concerns, high surf advisories already in place for South Padre Island in Texas as Tropical Storm Beta makes its approach in the Gulf of Mexico. This storm has been slowly strengthening as it looms closer and closer to Louisiana and Texas coastline, bringing more surf and bigger concerns for flooding as well. So already seeing the weather well away from that center. You can see where the center is. Most of the activity in terms of the strongest and tallest thunderstorms north and east of that center. It's kind of been the year of this type of not fully formed with everything around the center storm. See all that heavy rain in New Orleans this time last week. We were concerned about the rain with Sally. You could see more rain with Beta than you ever did with Sally this past week here. Here's the forecast, that rain to come. It kind of pushes on towards Texas, just southwest of Houston. Because of that forecast, it's going to kind of push on towards west. Even though it's kind of drifting north now, we still have some heavy rain southeast Louisiana, including you in New Orleans. But here's that model kind of bringing it north, then kind of pushing it northwest and westward and kind of meandering. Nothing strong or firm enough to really push this and clear this out of here. In fact, some of the models kind of strafe the coastline, loop it back down towards the south, and then potentially making another landfall or close to landfall as well. So this is going to be around for a while. Even the European model forecast has it coming in inland and back on towards the coast. It's going to be around for a while. It doesn't matter at this point whether it's a hurricane or a tropical storm. It's going to bring weather. That weather is going to be heavy, heavy rain. Yes, there'll be some wind as well, but the heavy, heavy rain, the persistent rain. If you get 2-3 inches of rain a day, for the next 5 days, that's 15 inches of rain. That's going to cause massive flood concerns. And you can see, yes, there is also a wind concern with this as well. Now, the winds might diminish as it does, if it does make landfall, but the rain is going to lash and dump and dump and dump. Waves are up as well. I know the surfers out in Corpus are loving this slight offshore flow with that wind as well, but that's also going to create coastal flood concerns, not to mention a rise in the ocean. A little storm surge here, about 2 to 4 feet, including you in Galveston down towards North Padre Island. Melissa?
All right, so Beta, one to watch very closely the next several days. Well, we're a little bit more than halfway through. It's already been a tough season in the tropics, so now is the time to be prepared for the next storm. Meteorologist Kelly Cass walks us through some of the essentials that you need to know to get ready ahead of a hurricane.
Hurricane preparedness can save your life. by having a few items on hand in advance, you can make a hurricane survival kit. First, get a plastic tub or large container that can also fit in your car in case you have to evacuate. Get plenty of non-perishable foods. Make sure you have a 3-day supply for evacuation, 2-week supply for home. You will need bottled water, at least a gallon per person per day. Have an updated first aid kit on hand. And pack LED flashlights, and don't forget the fresh batteries. Have your cell phones charged, and if you can, bring an extra charger. And make sure you go to an ATM in advance to grab some cash. If the power is out, you won't be able to use your debit or credit card. Having a small gas container will come in handy if you run low on fuel for your vehicle, or if you have a generator. If you do decide to run a generator, please do not run it inside your house. Generators emit a deadly amount of carbon monoxide. When finding a position for your generator, it is crucial that the area is dry, well ventilated, level, and away from your home.
Well, Beta isn't the only system we're keeping an eye on. Hurricane Teddy is forecast to move just east of Bermuda late tomorrow night into early Monday, and it's expected to make some big waves as well as it moves up far away from the East Coast, but still moves up northward. So let's talk a little bit more about Teddy, because this is one of those storms where you think, well, it's all the way up by Bermuda. How is this going to impact the East Coast? It's already creating some large swells, and that's going to help, in addition to a couple of other things, create some dangerous surf conditions and rip current risks along our East Coast beaches. So right now, 125 mile per hour maximum sustained winds. It's a Category 3 hurricane. You'll notice it's still 600 miles south and east of Bermuda. But here's the track from the Hurricane Center. We've got a tropical storm warning for Bermuda itself, and it's going to, center of the storm, maybe just off the coast of Bermuda, but it's going to be close enough to it to where, yes, it's going to create some tropical storm conditions, really large waves and dangerous surf conditions as well for Bermuda. And this comes on the heels of Paulette, which moved right over Bermuda early last week. So you notice as we head into Tuesday, Wednesday timeframe, yes, it's heading up towards Newfoundland and Nova Scotia as well, Halifax within that cone of uncertainty. But meanwhile, as Hurricane Teddy is moving well off the coast, it's going to be increasing the wave heights over the Atlantic. And that, in combination with a strong northeasterly wind and higher than normal tides off the coast, means we're going to actually have some coastal flooding this weekend. And we also have a high rip current risk, which is going to last through the weekend and into early next week. So you notice today's rip current forecast, high all the way from Boston and New England down through our Ocean City beaches and Atlantic City as well, and New Jersey, all the way down through the Outer Banks, where they've been seeing some coastal flooding already this morning at high tide. Now, from one coast to the other, Paul, we're talking about not rip currents on the West Coast, but still wildfires in Oregon.
Ongoing big concern out here towards the west. No incredible images now from the wildfires in Oregon. Wow, look at that. Smoke from these fires coloring the skies above Gaston, Oregon. This year has been one of the toughest on record for firefighters in California. Right now, more than 17,000 firefighters are deployed at 26 active fires across just California alone, making this one of the worst fire seasons in that state's history. We still have red flag warnings up across many states in the west. But yes, Oregon, Washington, even parts of Northern California, we got some needed rain yesterday. But it's not that really good soaker, so we still have elevated fire danger in the interior of the west. And sometimes these fronts come through. Yes, they drop some rain in the northwest, but then they come kind of wind events as well. So you see the increase of humidity in the northern Rockies and the Pacific Northwest. But in the interior, well, our relative humidity is starting to decrease again. It'll go up as night falls and drop back down. I'm talking teens as we head on towards tomorrow. These fronts not only kind of dry out downsloping winds, they also increase the winds as well. So look for gusty winds, which is not what you want when you still have wildfires burning towards the west. The winds continue right on through the rest of this weekend.
Don't miss 2 episodes of World's Wildest Weather. Then at 3, World's Deadliest Weather.
Hurricane season doesn't stop for a pandemic, and neither do we.
From this point forward, conditions will continue to deteriorate.
Don't let COVID-19 take your eye off the tropics. This year's threat is more complex and dangerous than ever before.
Remain vigilant, pay close attention to the Weather Channel.
No one can cover this historic hurricane season better than the Weather Channel. Get the information you need to stay safe every day. Storm safety in a pandemic, all season long, right here on the Weather Channel.
Well, Alabama's Gulf Coast, talking about Gulf Shores, Orange Beach, even Fort Morgan, all now closed to visitors as the region recovers from Hurricane Sally's widespread devastation. And anyone who planned to perhaps spend the final weekend of summer there on the Alabama coast, well, they had to kind of change those plans for sure, as crews are still working to clear the area of debris and restore power in many areas over the next several days. Well, Herb Malone, CEO and president of Gulf Shores and Orange Beach Tourism, joins us live this morning with details on the efforts now underway to rebuild and kind of bounce back. I just returned from there yesterday. I was talking to the mayor of Orange Beach, and he was hoping that even some power there on Perdido Beach Boulevard would actually come on yesterday. What's the status of power being restored to the area?
Well, Paul, good morning. Electricity is being recovered frequently in different areas of the island. In sort of midtown of Gulf Shores, they turned on a lot of lights last night. I hadn't had a chance to get out to Orange Beach this morning yet, but I hear that there has been quite a bit of recovery there. Fort Morgan, where I live, is still without power. My street may be without it for a while because a cell tower fell on the only access road into our neighborhood.
There are definitely a lot of problems here, a lot of things we got to get over. So what are some of the biggest obstacles now facing Gulf Shores and Orange Beach and Fort Morgan?
Well, I think it goes in phases. They first get everything cleaned up, get the power and all the other utensils. All the other. I'm sorry. People can't quit calling me. It's a system of getting it all done and getting our guests, our tourists back in safely.
And it's a beautiful part of the Gulf Coast there as well. So how soon do you think the area will be back up and running? Because you did kind of issue that, hey, for 10 days, I guess now it's 8 days, you don't want any more visitors because you just can't properly host them.
Well, that's true. That there's always some people that just want to come look and see the damage, but we try to discourage that as best we can. It helps our recovery come through much quicker if the streets aren't cluttered with extra people driving around. So that 10 days was an estimate at that time. I got my fingers crossed. I hope we can do it before that. But a lot of our places right along the beachfront, our condos, our hotels, and whatever, they most all of them took some level of damage and at least had water in them. So it takes a little while to get that dried out and cleaned up and make sure when our guests come back, they're getting the treatment that they expect.
And Herb, we have about 30 seconds left. Real quick, the pier there in Gulf State Park just finished a $2.4 million renovation, and part of that now is missing. Talk about what kind of blow is this to the area?
Well, we're very disappointed. They had to do some renovation on the pier over the last few months. They missed the summer season, and I don't believe in all the hurricanes I've sat through, going all the way back to Frederick, I don't believe I've ever seen the piling that holds up that pier, the concrete piling, be destroyed as it was in this one. This was a storm that had some extreme strength in it.
All right, Herb Malone, thank you for your time. CEO and president of Gulf Shores and Orange Beach Tourism. Thanks for joining us, and we wish a speedy recovery to the area, beautiful area of the coast. And then, Melissa, you have more on the kind of the before and after looks of this gorgeous area of the Gulf Coast.
Yeah, and I think this brings up a great point that it's not all about just what's the category of the storm. There are so many other aspects, including the size of the storm and especially the speed of the storm. And in the case of Sally, because it was moving so slowly, you had repeated just batches of rain that would not let up and really just caused a lot of damage. Take, for example, the Fort Morgan Peninsula in Alabama. There's the before image, and then afterwards, look, all the docks and everything are just missing, all of the docks for these people's houses. Well, let's head over to Gulf Shores, Alabama, and you can see how the dunes were just taken out when you look at the before versus after photos at the beach. A lot of beach erosion, too. Here's Gulf Shores, Alabama. We did have some wind damage, but also a lot of damage from the storm surge, that just really took cars and everything and floated them away. A lot of damage there, Paul, and we really are keeping these people in our thoughts with the recovery efforts that will take some time.
Yeah, and Melissa, we had Laura, we had now Sally, and guess what? Now eyes are on the western Gulf. We also had Hannah there. And once again, the Texas, Louisiana coastline, because yet another threat. Tropical storm Beta is forecast to become a hurricane, so the Texas, Louisiana coast on high alert. We can talk about how strong this could be and who's really at risk for what. That's coming up. Rare, rough weather in this piece of Greek paradise this week. A cyclone blew into this part of the Mediterranean with heavy winds and rain. This happened yesterday. One man who lives in this western part of the country says he's never seen weather this bad this time of the year. Nearly 4 decades that he's lived on this island. Yep, it's called a Medicane blowing through Greece there. Hey, back here at home, the Texas Gulf Coast. Once again, we are back on alert here. Tropical storm Beta slowly making its way closer to the region, threatening to unleash heavy rainfall and coastal flooding. Watches are in effect for the entire Texas coast, even a portion of the Louisiana coast, including Lake Charles, and other communities are still trying to recover after being devastated by Hurricane Laura just a few weeks ago. Let's get to our hurricane specialist, Dr. Greg Postel, for the latest on Tropical storm Beta.
Paul, thank you very much. Tropical storm Beta is already impacting the northern Gulf Coast. Look at all the rain here across parts of the coastal Louisiana, even New Orleans getting some moderate rain right now, despite the fact that the center of circulation over here and over here is over about 300 miles away. That's the kind of scope and scale we're talking about with Tropical storm Beta. Let's have a live look, though, at Houston right now. In Houston, the weather's actually pretty nice. We're talking about low 70s. Most of the bad weather with Beta is located well east of there over, as I said, coastal Louisiana and areas nearby, where 60-mile-per-hour Tropical storm Beta continues to move only very slowly across the region. I mean, it's moving only a few miles per hour and probably will continue to move at only a few miles per hour. Look at this. This is the cone from the Hurricane Center. It doesn't look much like a cone, does it? In fact, there's nothing different about the way it was built this time. It's just that it's compressed because the storm is moving so slowly that the cone has shrunk into that. And that's what we're going to be dealing with. A very, very impactful system moving close to the Texas coast and Louisiana coast over the next couple of days. Residents all the way from Brownsville through New Orleans and even eastward from there, pay close attention to Tropical storm Beta. It's going to be around for a while. Melissa.
It's going to be a marathon for us, and it's going to be not just a couple of days. We could be talking about dealing with Beta all week long. Well, let's talk a little bit more about those impacts for the Gulf Coast, because this storm is different from other storms. Every single storm has its own, each individual kind of threats. And with this one, because of how long we're going to be dealing with Beta, we're going to talk about impacts, especially from rainfall that lasts for a while. And you notice right now, we look at the satellite and radar, all of the thunderstorm activity is really all lopsided to the right side of the storm. So you're seeing all this rain moving into southeastern Louisiana, and we will continue to see that throughout the day today. But then once we head through that long duration track that kind of swirls around, as Dr. Postel was showing you, we're going to see that kind of rain adding up, not just in southeastern Louisiana, but throughout all the Texas coastline as well. So look at the rain still to come from Beta. We could be talking about 5 to 8 inches locally of rainfall. And if that track wiggles even further west onto the Texas coastline, some of those rain totals could go up even more. So it could be for some spots where you get maybe 3 days in a row where you're dealing with rain that could be 2 to 3 inches a day, and that's going to be adding up. Now, the flash flood risk, as we see Beta moving further westward, closing in on that Texas coastline Sunday and into Monday. Here's who could see flash flooding already tomorrow. So that could be for places like Corpus Christi, Galveston, and also towards Cameron as well. Dr. Postel, for Houston itself, it looks like they have to be prepared as well for that rain that could last into the start of the work week.
Melissa, I think you're right. I mean, I think residents all the way from Brownsville, Texas, and even in Mexico. Watch out for the progress of this storm because it's going to be moving slowly and wobbling around very close enough to bring impacts from Texas through Louisiana and areas nearby and everywhere in between. Right now, believe it or not, the center is here, which is about 300 miles away from New Orleans, as I mentioned earlier, and we're getting quite a bit of rain. In fact, most of the rain with Beta is in coastal Louisiana right now, but I put the reconnaissance mission on here, the one that's in progress, to show you how strong it is according to their observations. On their first pass, they measured winds of somewhere around 50 miles per hour on the I guess that first cross through the center. And the second time around, nearer the center, they saw winds near 60 miles per hour. So it is indeed verification that we are dealing with a 60-mile-per-hour tropical storm. But check this out. I got distracted by this a little while ago. This is where the center of circulation is, again, where for most of the morning, there has been essentially no bad weather. But very recently, we started to see a flare-up of thunderstorms. Can you see all those lightning strikes in there? Right around the center of circulation. Now, if we continue to see that, let's say for another 6, 12, 18 hours, then we could be dealing with some rather interesting intensification. But right now, we'll just have to see how long those thunderstorms stick around for. But right now, for those of us in Texas and Louisiana and nearby, say Mississippi and Alabama, you're going to get some rainy weather and some breezy conditions. That will be the weather story today, but we'll have much more on Beta coming up after the break.
So get your daily dose of everything weather.
Wow! Boy, do we have a lot to talk about.
Weather Today from the Weather Channel. New episodes every day, only on Quibi.
Well, ripped roofs, battered homes, and debris strewn all over the ground here. Just look at the devastation left behind in Florida's panhandle by Hurricane Sally. This video taken in Perdido Key. Hard hit by the storm's winds and rain, even some surge here just days ago. Well, this morning, the Army Corps of Engineers is hard at work for sure, helping Americans across the Gulf deal with the catastrophic damage left behind by Hurricane Sally. It's mobilized more than 100 people and hundreds of thousands of dollars as well to help those communities rebuild. Joining us this morning via Skype from Atlanta is Colonel Jason Kelly, commander with the Corps' South Atlantic Division. Thanks for joining us this morning, Colonel Kelly. Can you talk about the many resources that the Corps has deployed to respond to the needs that are still growing here along the Gulf Coast?
No, thank you for having me this morning, and really appreciate the opportunity to share what the Army Corps of Engineers is doing with local and state partners. And quite frankly, having been on the ground in Mobile during landfall, what our local and state partners are doing is nothing short of amazing. We're really augmenting where we can and covering down on the federal projects, helping to make sure that we get back in motion most rapidly. That is the core effort right now in the form of modeling, pumps where necessary, aiding with sandbags in Florida, and continued damage assessments throughout the region.
Widespread impact is lack of power. So how is that power, a lack of it, impacting what the Corps is trying to do?
Yeah, it absolutely has an impact. Members of our team live and work in these communities. So down power lines, loss of power certainly has impacted our ability to get back out. But I'll tell you, the team is resilient. I was in Mobile with the commander, Colonel Sebastian Jolis, in spite of his family's loss of power, and we're living through the night in the dark. He was up early the next morning with me, surveying damage throughout Mobile. And so it has an impact. But I'll tell you, our team, as is the case in communities in Alabama and Florida, continue to get after it.
This is now our fourth hurricane making landfall in the U.S., our third landfall in the Gulf of Mexico. This is also the year of the coronavirus, the pandemic. So how has the coronavirus pandemic impacted what the men and women of the Corps are doing right now?
Yeah, and added variable. We are required and continue to do the things that we need to do for the nation, but we're doing them in a different way. We're mindful of the conditions, the environment. This is a condition that we're dealing with as you overlay the pandemic and the need to wear personal protective equipment, maintain physical distance, and wash our hands rapidly. We're continuing to do what we need to do, but we're doing it in a different and responsible and safe way.
Well, we thank you for the job that you and the men and women of the Corps are doing. That's Colonel Jason Kelly with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. Thanks for the hard work that you're still ongoing to help Americans recover from yet another disaster there in the Gulf. And Melissa, yes, Sally is gone. The damage is not, but we're still watching other potential damaging storms gather strength right now.
Yeah, and it's hard to believe that we are still just barely over halfway through with the peak of the hurricane season. So we've got a long way to go. We've already had 23 named storms. That is #1 in terms of ranking out of the last 170 years. But in terms of our hurricanes, we've only had 8 hurricanes. Now we are done with our normal list of names, rather. We're on to the Greek alphabet. So yes, we are watching Beta very closely. We are watching Teddy very closely. But look at this out in the eastern Atlantic. We have several other areas that we're watching. We've got kind of the ghost of Paulette, so to speak, that is this area to watch up here in the far north Atlantic that has the potential to develop. We have Tropical Storm Wilfred, which is kind of like Tropical Storm Wimpy. It's going to be dying out soon. And then another area to watch coming off the coast of Africa. And September is the time of the year when we can often get kind of almost this conveyor belt of storms coming off the coast of Africa. So let's start off with Wilfred, 40-mile-per-hour maximum sustained winds. And this storm, yes, it doesn't look very impressive on satellite. And you know what? The conditions are not going to be favorable over the next 5 days. In fact, Hurricane Center current forecast cone has this thing kind of falling apart here between the weekend and early Monday. So nothing to be too concerned about. And that is good, considering how many storms that we have to keep our eye on elsewhere within the Atlantic. All right, we're heading up to the post-tropical, really remnants of Paulette. And you notice this still has a 50% chance that it could still develop and move south of the Azores Islands as well. And then off the coast of Africa, another cluster of thunderstorms. This one has a 10% chance of development as it moves closer to the Cabo Verde Islands. We got to watch that one, though, because we've seen a lot of storms come off the coast of Africa and end up developing, Paul, this year into named systems.
Busy, busy, busy. Hey, this is the last Saturday of summer, and guess what? Saturday summer school is still in session. Let's call it Saturday school. How about that? Hey, stick around. We'll talk about some of the common household items you can use to teach your kids about how pressure powers a hurricane.
Thank you for taking me.
Welcome back to the Weather Channel. Weekend Recharge. We're still watching the tropics here. Here's a live look at our radar, seeing rain rolling into areas of Louisiana, even parts of coastal Mississippi, and even Dauphin Island, Alabama, seeing a few sprinkles. That's all because of Tropical Storm Beta. Thinking, what? That's right, our latest named storm. And here's the path from the National Hurricane Center. It'll bring it towards the Texas coast, and that line kind of holds it just off the coast right now, though this forecast could change. Bottom line is forecast to become a hurricane as we head on towards tomorrow, maintain its strength into Monday and early Tuesday. Perhaps if it doesn't make landfall, it could come very close to making landfall. But bottom line, it's all the weather, regardless of where that center is. That means rain, heavy rain, coastal flooding, inland flooding, days of heavy rain. Again, this is through from now, basically through Thursday. It is still in the Gulf impacting parts of the western Gulf with heavy rain, which means this has another flash flood disaster in the making as we're still tracking Beta. Melissa?
And just less than 10 minutes away, Paul, from our next update from the Hurricane Center. Well, American Science Lab is in session. Every Saturday at this time, we're teaching some weather science at home with our families and sharing it with you and your family at home. Today, our Jen Carfagno teaches us about the type of pressure associated with a hurricane.
So we've been talking a lot about hurricanes. And in a hurricane, what is the center of the hurricane called, Natalie?
The eye.
The eye. Kelly, what kind of pressure is there inside the eye?
Low pressure.
Low pressure. What direction does air move?
From high pressure to low pressure.
From high pressure to low pressure. And we've done a lot of experiments that can show that. This is a really neat one, though, that we can do today that shows how strong the air is, how it can push water just because of a change in pressure. Are you guys ready?
Yeah, let's get started.
You just need a couple of ingredients. You need some birthday candles, a plate with a little bit of clay on it, a little bit of water, and a glass cup. We just put a little bit of clay on top of our plate, and that's to hold our candle. Now you can set that in there. And Kelly, you're going to pour some water around the candle.
How much?
You can fill up the plate. All right, so next we just light the candle and have that glass ready, Kelly, because we're going to place the glass on top, upside down, of the candle, setting it in the water. All right, so let's watch this closely. The water is rising in the glass.
That's so cool.
Oh, wow. Inside the glass, we've created just a little bit of low pressure. Not a lot, but it doesn't have to be a lot. And so that amount of pressure change allowed high pressure outside to force the water to go up in the glass.
That's cool.
The power of pressure.
I love it. Kitchen chemistry, stuff you can do at home with your kids. Well, Take Your Seat Saturday School is in session on the Weather Channel. We want students of all ages to send us a video with your weather science questions, and we're going to answer some of them right here on air. All right, well, we were talking about the science of pressure within hurricanes, and Dr. Postel, hurricane it is. We have Hurricane Teddy, and we have another storm, Beta, which could potentially become a hurricane. Things are in the very active in the tropics and expected to stay that way the next couple days.
Indeed. Let's go right to Hurricane Teddy because we just got the newest advisory on Hurricane Teddy, which is right there. So it's not near land now, but it will get closer to Bermuda over the next few days. This is a 120-mile-per-hour Category 3 hurricane. And by the way, there is Bermuda. Now, though the center of Teddy is expected to pass well east of Bermuda, let's say Monday morning, by about 175 or so miles, we could still see some tropical storm force winds. There's probably about a 30 to 40% chance that Bermuda gets, 40-mile-per-hour average winds or sustained winds with gusts maybe 50 or 60 miles per hour. There's some chance of that. But the good news here, with that track, the core of Teddy remains steady. The core of Teddy stays well east of Bermuda. But maybe not so much for parts of the Canadian Maritimes, including Nova Scotia, where we indeed might have actually a direct landfall of Teddy. Now, if Teddy's still a hurricane, it would be a hurricane landfall. We're not sure the structure of it. It may be undergoing transition to more of a big area of low pressure, like a giant nor'easter. Either way, impacts are going to be significant, with the center of Teddy likely to make it somewhere on board here. But there is even still a little bit of a chance, not much of one, but a little bit, that perhaps the center gets very close to, if not makes it on board into down east Maine. How about that? But let's say that doesn't happen, and that's probably not going to happen. We still will see significant impacts in down east Maine, very likely on Tuesday, with some wind and heavy rain. Caribou down through Bar Harbor, Maine. Watch out for some gusty winds and rain with Teddy nearby. We'll be right back.
Hey, can I
hold on 1 second?
Sure.
Okay.
Good Saturday morning and welcome to Weekend Recharge. I'm Paul Goodlow along with Melissa Nord and well as Dr. Greg Postel. We have breaking news now. The latest advisory is in on Tropical Storm Beta. And you can see now the westward movement has begun. Now northwest at 3 miles per hour. You can see where that center is, starting to become better organized with thunderstorms, but a lot of the weather is still off to the north and east of that center. Seems to be the story of many developing storms and hurricanes this year, especially here in the Gulf of Mexico. But this has designs to make landfall potentially here as we go the next several days, but weather is already being felt on land. Let's get the very latest on what's going on here with this new advisory with our hurricane specialist, Dr. Greg Postel.
Paul, we're already seeing the impacts of Tropical Storm Beta across parts of the northern Gulf Coast, even southern Louisiana, coastal Louisiana, seeing some heavy rain, even as far north as New Orleans. Now, that's about 300 miles away from where the center of Tropical Storm Beta is, out over the middle of the Gulf of Mexico there. So we'll be watching that very carefully, but that's not the only game in town. When you look at the bigger picture, there's more out there. We've got a big-time hurricane, a Category 3, that is Hurricane Teddy. That's going to make a close run at Bermuda over the next couple of days, and then maybe even bring some impacts, believe it or not, to Maine by Tuesday or Wednesday of next week. Let's have a look now at what we've got with the sort of overall tropical view. There's a lot going on here, and sometimes I ask myself, what isn't circled? What isn't circled on this map? And not much. In fact, we have most of those cloud clusters out there are either candidates to become a tropical cyclone or are one already. So that is how busy it is out there. Now, Teddy, the one that I mentioned that could make a close encounter with Bermuda, let's say late tomorrow or early Monday, and then on into perhaps maybe nearby coastal Maine, is a 120-mile-per-hour hurricane. It is likely to be weakening over the next couple of days as it moves northward over the North Atlantic. We'll talk about that later. But Melissa, we're also going to have a closer inspection of what's going on with Tropical Storm Beta over the Gulf of Mexico, and we'll talk about that latest advisory. Back to you.
Yeah, and that advisory just dropped minutes ago, and we're going to begin this morning diving into the latest of that advisory. Texas and Louisiana along the coast on high alert as Beta slowly churns in the Gulf of Mexico, beginning that westward track, and it will begin to strengthen as well as it approaches the coast, bringing with it the threat of dangerous surf and torrential rain. So we have a new track from the Hurricane Center. We also have new tropical storm warnings that have just been issued for Port Aransas to intracoastal city, Louisiana. So that's part of Texas and part of Louisiana. We're going to get to that. And here they are. Okay, so we're waiting for them to drop on the graphic. But again, still in Port Aransas to intracoastal city, Louisiana, you have now tropical storm warnings in effect, in addition to the hurricane watches. So we'll be diving into that. Now, here's the latest track, okay? So we're looking at it the first, just as you guys are seeing it for the first time. We still have that overall smushed view where the storm is not moving very quickly because it's not being steered, but it's begun its westward movement, okay? So it's no longer moving due north, it's moving due west. By tomorrow morning, we have 65-mile-per-hour maximum sustained winds. But then we get into Sunday evening as it's getting closer and closer to the coast. It has the potential to become now a hurricane, and then it's going to turn towards the east, get steered back towards the east, so kind of making almost an S shape there, and then by Wednesday passing somewhere near Houston or maybe just off the coast of Texas. So that is the latest advisory coming in from the National Hurricane Center just at 11 o'clock, breaking right now. So it's been moving north, and what's going to happen is the steering currents are, well, they're very weak, but it's going to be changing. So it was moving northward. Now high pressure that's over to the west is going to help steer it back towards the west. But as it's making this slow movement over days and days and days, one of the largest threats with Tropical Storm Beta is going to end up being the threat of very heavy rainfall right along the coast that could lead to flooding. We've already been seeing some of that rain approaching southeastern Louisiana, and now we're going to see those rain totals that will start to add up for places that maybe even saw heavy rain earlier this season from Hannah. So, Paul, let's talk a little bit more about that heavy rainfall threat, because it really could be a pretty big risk along the coast of Texas and Louisiana.
Yeah, flooding, heavy rain in Texas. We've had a lot of history with this as well. In fact, take a look at these pictures shot earlier this year in parts of waterlogged Texas Wilesco, all because of the rain from Hurricane Hannah, dumping more than 2 feet of rain in some parts of the kind of southern Texas there. Another massive rainfall flooding event could prove disastrous for the state on top of dealing with the coronavirus as well. So heavy rain flooding is going to be a huge concern. And unfortunately, we're starting to see this thing getting better organized as well. But where is it going? It's finally kind of drifting more towards the west. But let's talk about the timing of this with Dr. Rick Postel, because Dr. Postel, again, it doesn't really have to be a huge Category 3 hurricane to have major impacts on land there in Texas and Louisiana.
We are already seeing impacts from Tropical Storm Beta, even though it's, let's say, about 300 miles off the coast. Well, in coastal Louisiana, we're dealing with some heavy rain, including areas like New Orleans and areas just to the southeast of Lake Charles. But I'm showing you right here the most recent reconnaissance mission from the hurricane hunters. The Air Force has been in there earlier in this morning, and on their first pass in this direction, they found winds near 50 miles per hour. And on the second pass in that direction, they found winds closer to 60 miles per hour, giving us sort of a ground truth, so to speak, that this is indeed a 60 mile per hour tropical storm with the center of circulation around 995 millibars there. But notice that most of the bad weather is way off to the north and east. Why is that? Well, there is an upper trough, a dip in the jet stream that is still impacting Tropical Storm Beta in a way that is promoting the development of thunderstorms on its northeastern side. Now, that's going to continue, I think, for a little while longer, and that as long as that trough is there in that position, that should limit the intensification rate a little bit with some wind shear overall over Beta. That doesn't mean it can't strengthen at all, but it probably won't strengthen very quickly. And you can see already we're seeing some wind gusts of 20 to 30 miles per hour along the coast, and a lot of bad weather lurking off just south of the mouth of the Mississippi. But what is that going down on there? You might be looking at the bottom of your screen. Aha, you found something. Well, yeah, this is the area of low pressure, that 995 low that the hurricane hunters found, which a few hours ago was naked. There was no thunderstorm anywhere near it. You could see the center circulation from space if you were up there, but you can't anymore. There's some thunderstorms that are beginning to wrap around it right in there. And when that happens, sometimes you can get some strengthening to happen soon thereafter as the pressure falls a little bit and the winds pick up. We'll see if indeed that does happen later today. But overall, the movement, as we've talked about, is going to be slow. There's a timeline at the top, and there is Beta kind of wobbling around not very far from the Texas coastline, bringing in impacts, we think, as early as tomorrow and even into Monday. Perhaps some gusty winds and flooding rain and maybe some coastal flooding as well. But this is the problem. Weak steering flow. The jet stream is way up there. It's not in a position to push Beta out of the way very quickly. So it's just going to kind of linger for a little while until finally, maybe by Tuesday or Wednesday, it begins to move in that direction with some stronger westerlies. Paul, moving in. Back to you.
And for sure, we're going to see impacts all week long here across the coast of Texas. Here's a live look at South Padre Island, already seeing an agitated Gulf of Mexico. And it's hard to believe it, but typically you don't see very many big waves, let alone whitecaps here in the Gulf, but you do now. Or in fact, we have coastal flood, high surf advisories already in place here on South Padre here in Texas, as Beta is still rolling on through the Gulf of Mexico. And as it slowly strengthens, we're going to see a lot more dangerous surf and now flood threaten the coastline as well. So let's talk about the impacts. Dr. Postel talked about how we're now seeing thunderstorms right around that center, but also notice where it is currently, the large area of thunderstorms well off to the east and kind of northeast of that center. That's where that rain is pushing on towards the Alabama coast, Mississippi coast, even southeast Louisiana. New Orleans, we got rain, probably seeing more rain with Beta than you ever did with Sally. And this time last week, we were definitely concerned about heavy rain and flooding with Sally, but New Orleans is always vulnerable because a strong summer thunderstorm could cause flooding in that city. Here's the forecast. More rain here in southeast Louisiana. But look how in the latter part of this kind of model, it shifts back to areas of Texas, Houston on towards Corpus, Victoria. All those areas can see some very heavy rain over days and days and days. That model goes through Thursday. But Beta's going to be around, whether it's a hurricane or a storm, well into perhaps the end of next week. European model kind of has it coming close to land as we head on towards, say, Monday, Tuesday timeframe, maybe making landfall Monday, Tuesday as a hurricane. Bottom line is it doesn't stay on shore, unfortunately. Some models are bringing it back over the Gulf. We're kind of hovering and meandering, paralleling the coastline here, bringing more rain to Houston, even Lake Charles and Cameron Parish there in Louisiana. Not something we want to see. So flash flooding is an ongoing concern because this is not just going to be a 1 or 2 day rain event. This will be a multiple day rain event. And don't get caught up exactly where that center is. Get caught up in where the weather is. The weather is going to be strafing much of the, if you're within, say, 100 miles of the Texas, Louisiana coast, you can have impacts of this well into the next 5 to 7 days. Melissa?
Yeah, this one's going to be certainly, Paul, a marathon for us. It will take days. Well, thinking about prepping your home for this storm or maybe the next one, think about one of the most vulnerable spots in your home that may be overlooked when it comes to storm preparation, your garage door. Our Tevin Wooten explains why you should have a plan to reinforce it.
An often overlooked vulnerability in home safety is the garage door. It's the biggest opening to your house and it needs to be protected.
The garage door is a large opening in your house, and if the wind gets into this and causes it to fail, now you have a big opening, the wind's pushing in there and it's trying to pop your roof off. So the garage door, it has to open, and you can see by pushing on this, it goes in its track. One way that we've seen them fail is that the wind blows and it just buckles it, and it buckles in and goes past the track.
And so the wind is simply getting in through that little bit of a gap between the door and the frame, and that's all it takes.
Right.
There are ways to take preventative action and reinforce your garage door. If you're buying new, make sure you get a wind-rated garage door. If you're in an older home and aren't quite sure if you have a wind-rated garage door, you can buy and install bracing kits. Bracing kits are hardware that can be installed on the edge to help keep the garage door in the channel and not let it blow in. So when planning your hurricane protection strategy, don't forget about the garage door to help keep your roof intact.
Well, we've got some new video into the Weather Channel from the Outer Banks of North Carolina. This is overwash swamping over vehicles in Buxton, North Carolina. This was shot just 1 hour before high tide this morning. The North Carolina DOT says ocean overwash is occurring in several places, including right there in Buxton and Pea Island. Drivers are asked to use extreme caution if traveling on Highway 12 over the next several days, as overwash around high tides can get certainly worse. And that overwash that we're seeing, the tidal flooding, it's kind of related to 3 different things: northeast winds, higher than normal astronomical tides, and Teddy, which is actually on its way moving close to Bermuda over the next couple of days. Going to impact Bermuda late tomorrow night into Monday. It's expected to make not just impacts there, but some large wave swells, a high rip current risk all along the east coast of the U.S. And here's the latest advisory from the National Hurricane Center that just came in right before 11 o'clock. Still a Category 3, 120 mile per hour maximum sustained winds hurricane. And we've got this tropical storm warning for the island of Bermuda. The reason why it's not a hurricane warning, well, it has to do with the track. The center of Teddy will likely stay just off the coast. So this is going to maybe limit the max winds, but nonetheless, the wave heights with this storm are going to be really impressive. In fact, there were some estimated wave heights yesterday, very close to the center of Teddy, over 45 feet. Yeah. Okay, so the track over the next 5 days, this is going to be generally moving to the north, and eventually this will impact Newfoundland and Nova Scotia. Halifax could be impacted as the storm kind of loses some of its tropical characteristics there as it moves into the cooler ocean waters to the north. So one of the big things that we're going to see with Teddy is that this storm, which is way out in the Atlantic, it's going to be increasing the overall wave heights for us along the east coast. So we have Teddy approaching, and that's going to increase the wave heights. And then we also have a really strong pressure gradient, which is also kind of everything kind of adds together. And this is going to mean we have a high rip current risk. We have large swells, basically dangers in the water right along the east coast. Today's rip current risk, if you're thinking about going to the beach because it's nice outside, that drop in humidity along the Outer Banks, look at this. High rip current risk for you, Virginia Beach, all the way up into Cape Cod. Paul?
Let's go from the East Coast to the West Coast right now. And a funeral procession was held for a hero killed on the front lines of California's firefight. Forestry officials confirming a firefighter was killed on Thursday while battling the El Dorado fire. It burned 70 miles east of Los Angeles. That fire has burned more than 19,000 acres of Angeles Oaks. Right now, more than 17,000 firefighters are deployed at 26 active fires across California, making this one of the worst fire seasons in California state history. And by the way, this fire was the one started by the gender reveal party. So celebration of life has now kind of a double meaning there because of what's going on with the wildfire. We did have some rain. Parts of California, Northern California, Oregon, Washington, that's great news, but it's not really lingering and pushing into the interior. That means more fire danger, elevated fire risk continues here. Now, yes, we welcome the increase in humidity, but it's not everywhere. This front coming through, bringing the rain, has increased RH in some areas, but other areas, it's still very, very dry and getting drier as we increase the temperature throughout the day. But the Pacific Northwest at least sees some relief there momentarily, but you start drying out tomorrow. These fronts coming through, once they lose their moisture, we see downsloping winds, which kind of heats and dry things out, as well as bringing more gusty winds across the area as we head on towards this afternoon. Even some winds gusty throughout the evening, and then really pick back up as we head on towards Sunday afternoon as well. So it's dry and windy, not good combination of weather impacts when you have the fire still burning across the rest. Hey, the very latest in the West, as well as what's going on in the tropics, coming up.
Starting at 1, don't miss 2 episodes of World's Wildest Weather. Then at 3, World's Deadliest Weather.
Hurricane season doesn't stop for a pandemic, and neither do we.
From this point forward, conditions will continue to deteriorate.
Don't let COVID-19 take your eye off the tropics. This year's threat is more complex and dangerous than ever before.
Remain vigilant, pay close attention to the Weather Channel.
No one can cover this historic hurricane season better than the Weather Channel. Get the information you need to stay safe every day. Storm safety in a pandemic, all season long, right here on the Weather Channel.
Take a look at this. Erosion, flooding, and debris scattered all along the water line here in Mobile, Alabama. This drone video provided by the Army Corps of Engineers, proving that just one powerful storm can change the landscape just overnight. Yeah, we're seeing more and more of that as well. Well, this 2020 hurricane season isn't just historic. It's been absolutely heartbreaking for millions of Americans. In fact, an Orange Beach family, well, they rode out Hurricane Sally in their home this past week. And just when they thought things couldn't get any worse, guess what? They did. Dave Melkoff has their unbelievable story.
It's hard to miss the pile of ash and soot, the column of smoke. That is what's left of Jack Rayburn's dream home, the one with his name, his wife's, and his kids etched in the concrete.
I ran out of there with a pair of shorts and underwear on. No shirt, no shoes. I lost everything I owned in this fire.
As Category 2 Hurricane Sally tore into Orange Beach, Alabama, the Rayburns were here, riding it out.
Sat down on that boat trailer that's right there, and it's all melted now, but I sat down on that. I had a friend here helping me clean up a little bit, and I said, man, I can't imagine it getting any worse than this. Look at this. And then...
That was before the fire.
That night is when the house caught on fire.
Jack's son Chandler woke him up around 1 a.m. The neighbor's house was on fire. Everyone ran next door, in and out of the burning house, ultimately saving lives.
Screaming, Clint, Sue, come to me. Hear my voice, come to me. It was probably 45 seconds to a minute. They never showed up, so I went back in the house, and I stood at the top of their stairs, and by then it was, it was fully involved.
Clint and Sue were already out back and safe, but Jack couldn't see that through the flames and the smoke and the floodwater and the darkness. In the confusion, the fire had a chance to skip over to Jack's house. So you survived the hurricane?
Yes.
Could you ever imagine this happening after?
No, it was kind of crazy. It's surreal. We had 3.5 feet of water under our house.
This fire would have been much worse if it hadn't been for the Orange Beach Fire Department pulling 1,000 feet of this heavy 5-inch fire hose through 3 feet of water at 4 a.m. These homes are a loss, but the rest of the neighborhood was saved.
The firefighters just had to swim their hoses.
Unreal.
Yeah.
I mean, because it could have taken out all of these houses.
And we were really fortunate.
Kimberly and Brandon Rice have the beach house across the street with no fire damage at all. Countless buildings here were flooded, they lost roofs and walls, but these firefighters contained the flames to these 2 homes. Jack moved here in 2003, and even if a concrete slab is the only thing left, this family chooses to stay.
So yes, absolutely, I can't wait to knock this down and start building back. It's going to be a long road. It's going to be, lots of ups and downs, lots of sorrow and tears and everything else, but I'm ready to move forward.
All these days later, the boat is still on fire, releasing all those chemicals into the air, making it very dangerous for everybody in this neighborhood to breathe after the hurricane, after the fire, and now this. In Orange Beach, Alabama, Dave Malkoff, the Weather Channel.
It's really insult to injury there. Heartbreaking to see those photos. And if you look from the air, from space, seeing the before versus after photos from a lot of the places very close to landfall, it really just speaks to you. Take, for example, Fort Morgan Peninsula in Alabama. And this is what it looked like before Sally moved through. Now, I want you to look at the docks, the piers that are heading out to people's boats. Look at the after photos now. And you notice that we are now missing a lot of those docks. They've been taken out, and that's something that's going to have to be rebuilt. Gulf Shores, Alabama, they had plenty of sand dunes before Sally moved in. Now, afterwards, you can see the dunes were taken out. We've got some damaged debris scattered throughout the hotel parking lots. Gulf Shores, Alabama, again, this is the before photo. Look at the roofs, how they're all intact before. We get into the after photos, and you'll notice we have, look, debris that's scattered throughout here and there. So we had damage from the wind. We had a lot of damage, though, from the water. And this is a great example. Look at this. Look at the bottom out here, before versus after. A lot of erosion from over 24 hours of storm surge and battering waves that really just took off. The peak here, this is Shores Little Key, I think, in that area. Paul?
Well, thanks, Melissa. Well, still ahead this morning on Weekend Recharge, a big chunk of the Western Gulf is on alert for Tropical Storm Beta, forecast to become a hurricane before it potentially can make landfall there in Texas. We're talking about how strong this could get and some of the biggest threats that we'll face over the next several days in this region. Plus, what if one of these cars is yours? Yes, sitting in floodwaters. Sally's storm surge damaged hundreds and even thousands of cars. We'll talk about it next.
Hey, my name is Don.
Oh, yeah, this is not the Gulf. This is Europe, Portugal. Subtropical storm Alpha making major waves off the coast of Portugal this week. Like this was shot just yesterday. Check out the rough seas off the coast of Portugal as that subtropical storm Alpha made landfall with nearly 45-mile-per-hour winds and pretty rough surf as well. What's left of Alpha is expected to dissipate as it continues to push on towards the east now. All right, from Western Europe to the Western Gulf. Back here at home, the Texas Gulf Coast once again back on alert. In New Orleans, you're seeing some rain right now, all because of Tropical Storm Beta as it's making its way closer and closer through the region here, threatening to unleash heavy rainfall and coastal flooding. Watches are in effect for the entire Texas coast and a portion of the Louisiana coast as well, including Lake Charles and other communities still struggling to recover from Hurricane Laura, which hit just a few weeks ago. Let's head to Dr. Greg Postel for the latest on our Tropical Storm Beta.
Yeah, Tropical Storm Beta is a long way from the Gulf Coast, but it is producing, even right now, some pretty significant rain across parts of coastal Louisiana and even areas as far north as New Orleans. So you can see right out over here, New Orleans and areas even just north of there are starting to see some moderate to heavy rain with some thunderstorms just offshore. So that's that with the rainfall right now ongoing with Tropical Storm Beta. Things will change though, but not yet for parts of the Texas Gulf Coast where Houston is actually looking pretty good. Sunny skies. I think that's going to be the case for the most of today. But later on, we're going to watch Tropical Storm Beta strengthen across parts of the northern Gulf of Mexico. This is the latest advisory as of 11 o'clock Eastern Time, 60-mile-per-hour tropical storm, and is expected to become a hurricane and then eventually get closer to the Gulf Coast of Texas. So while Houston, Corpus Christi, Brownsville, the weather today looks really good, it's going to get worse as we head toward the early part of next week. Melissa.
All right, thank you so much. And again, that track, it's going to be a slow mover. It is going to be days upon days that we're dealing with potentially tropical storm force winds, maybe even hurricane force winds, but the rain that I think a lot of people are going to end up feeling. And again, we have this new tropical storm warning, which is in the red color right through the central northern Texas coastline up through Galveston and into intracoastal city, Louisiana. So with the track, how it's going to be a slow mover, I think rain is going to be one of the biggest threats that a lot of folks are going to see. And right now we're seeing all that rainfall confined mainly to the northeastern portion of where Beta is, but rain still to come. Look at this as it moves further west over the next 36 hours. We start to add up on the rainfall, and we will see rain coming down in Houston, 3 to 5 inches, potentially even locally higher than that. And if the track of Beta moves just a little further west, you see over the water how we have all these places that are showing up in red where we could see, 8 to 12 inches. Well, we could easily see those kind of totals right along the coastline. So it really depends on where the final track of it is. Right now in New Orleans, it is 74. It is rainy. It is kind of a nasty day out there. But as we move forward with the track of Beta, where are we expecting that potential for flooding? Well, really anywhere along the coastline through Texas and even Louisiana as we head through the next 36 hours. So tomorrow through Monday morning, the track, Dr. Postel, this thing moves west, but the problem is that the steering currents are going to be so weak with this. So kind of timing out when it's going to make that shift back up to the north and east, those are still some uncertainties with the track of Beta.
Yeah, we have a lot to sort out. You're right about that, Melissa. And we are dealing with even impacts as we speak with Tropical Storm Beta, which is more than 200 miles as the crow flies from the southern Louisiana coast. Right about there is where the center of circulation is. Let's see, right about there. And we got a lot of heavy rain rolling into parts of southern Louisiana and coastal Mississippi. Rain and thunderstorms. Well, that's going to be the story today, kind of on the edge of Tropical Storm Beta. So let's have a look at what's going on in the inside, right in the middle. This is actually interesting for me because I'm starting to see a lot of thunderstorm activity with a lot of lightning right around where the center of circulation is. When you get that, that is oftentimes a precursor to strengthening. So I do believe if those thunderstorms remain durable, let's say they last longer than 6 to 10 hours, then we could see some notable strengthening of this during the late afternoon today and tonight. Something to watch very carefully because we know the water is extremely warm in this part of the Gulf of Mexico and deep too. There's a lot of heat content out there. So there is capability in the ocean atmosphere system in this part of the world to support a major hurricane. I'm not saying it's going to get there, but there are some ingredients there that might allow strengthening to occur fairly soon. We're seeing that. Coastal conditions, not really bad at all across the coast of Texas and southwestern Louisiana, but overall, they will get worse with a lot of rain on the way. We'll talk much more about Beta and also Hurricane Teddy, which might impact parts of Maine in a couple of days. Stay tuned.
America's biopharmaceutical companies have one very important thing in common.
A common enemy.
We're making great progress because we're collaborating.
Wow! Boy, do we have a lot to talk about.
Weather Today from the Weather Channel. New episodes every day, only on Quibi.
Well, this is part of the legacy of Hurricane Sally, a combination of heavy rain and storm surge, turning these streets into rivers or maybe just some lakes and ponds there. Yes, cars submerged not just in water, but in salt water. Nearly 25 inches, that's 2 feet of rain falling in Pensacola. Then you combine the storm surge at over 5.6 feet. Caused a lot of damage and destruction. So what do you do if your vehicle is flooded out during a hurricane? Well, we've got some answers for you because we got a lot of questions. That's why we're bringing in the car coach, Lauren Fix, joining us this morning with some safety tips as well. Thanks for joining us on this last weekend of summer. But let's talk about this. Still in the midst of very active hurricane season. So people getting to their cars, finding out they've had some flood damage. What's the first thing they should do when they get to their vehicles?
Well, first thing is if you can get an idea of how flooded it was it just up to the wheels or was it halfway up the vehicle? And either way, you probably want to be careful before you just start it. So to get an idea of where the water damage is, you can usually see a dirt line along your vehicle. If it's really flooded high, I wouldn't even start it. I would just call a mechanic, have it towed there, because if you start it, you could cause problems or it may not even start. But if it's low and it's just like halfway up the tire, then you might want to give it a shot, but make sure there's no water in the vehicle.
Well, speaking of water, we get water, in the field in our shoes and our boots. It's a hard time drying that out. So how do you dry out a car that's been flooded?
Well, actually, there's really no great way to do it because the damage that's left behind. So yes, you can use a wet vac and get it out of the carpeted area, but know that below the carpet, it's not padding like it is in your home. It's jute. It's a compression of plastic and all kinds of other things. So what it does is the water stays there. And when you think you've air dried it out, you've left behind mold, mildew, potentially E. coli. Because you got to remember, you don't know what's in the water. Salt water is very corrosive to wiring and also computers and anything that's metal. But in addition to that, what it's left behind, it could even be sewage water. It could be really dangerous for your health.
Oof, yeah, that's always a problem with the floodwaters here. But let's talk about this. What's the difference in a car being flooded by just rainwater versus a car being flooded by salt water?
Oh, well, salt water is highly corrosive. To give you an idea, I've got these brake components here. They're really, really rusted. And this is not because they've been sitting in a salvage yard. These are off of a flood damaged car. And the corrosion can be enough that the brakes won't work. So it's important that you have that checked out. Now, if the water gets high enough and it gets into your engine, you don't even want to try to start it because it will destroy the inside. It will not lubricate the motor. But what you don't see is regular salt water, rainwater. If it sits in deep water, this is a brake line that's brand new. And this is one that's been sitting in salt water. And the damage means that your brakes don't work. Think about fuel lines. Get from the gas tank from the back to the front where your engine is. That's going to be a problem because it could potentially cause a fire. These are the kind of things that are plainly obvious, but what isn't is airbags not deploying if the water was up high enough or anti-lock brake systems not working. All those safety features that are in play can stop at any time or not even function, which is why I tell people to be very careful before you think, there's no big deal, I'll just drive it.
Yeah, another accident waiting to happen. But okay, how do we fix this? Is a car a total loss? Will insurance help? What's the remedy here?
That's a good question. In many cases, your insurance will cover it, depending on your coverage, depending on your state as well. If you don't have insurance coverage and they tell you you're on your own, your best bet if it's really badly damaged is just trade it in toward another vehicle. They'll take that vehicle to a salvage yard, or you can sell it for parts yourself. I would not recommend just driving it, nor would I recommend trying to sell it on the private market because you wouldn't want to put someone in an unsafe vehicle. The thing is you can also do is if it's not too bad, you can take it to your favorite ASE certified technician, your dealer, your local mechanic, whatever you want, have them look at it. And if they can make an assessment for you and say, hey, listen, the fuse box got wet. Electrical does not like water, just like your computer, right? You get water dumped on it or coffee or something worse. It doesn't want to function. Your car won't function. Remember, new cars have their wiring wrapped in soy, and when it gets wet, it disintegrates, which also makes it a lovely home for rodents. So you got to keep that in mind as well. But in addition, that kind of stuff, damage is just not repairable or just so expensive, it's not worth it.
Yeah, Lauren, about 30 seconds left. Important question. After Harvey, we had an issue with flooded cars on the secondary market. What about saltwater flooded cars also coming back on the secondary market?
They do. They do come back on the secondary market, and used cars are a premium right now, higher than about 10 to 15% than your usual prices. I tell people if you're looking at a vehicle from a private owner or used car lot and you have that, you're thinking about buying it, get it checked by a certified technician, check Carfax. If you have any doubt, too good to be true, it probably is, and you should walk away.
Yeah, great advice. Too good to be true. It probably is. Lauren Fix, our car coach, thank you so much for that great information. All right, so another ride that we like to do, it's perhaps a ride with a dog. Dogs sticking their head up. Oh, what about these guys? Katie and Tegan, perhaps you're not driving but walking them today. A little chilly, but they're going to love this. Temperatures warming up low 60s here in Green Bay, Wisconsin. Let's move on towards Mertztown, PA. Lucky, Bella, and Rex. A nice little crew there. Also in the lower 60s today with plenty of sunshine there. And Myersdale for Sawyer. Lots of sunshine to do the little walkie.
This dog walking forecast.
Hey, on the Weather Channel. Starting at 1, don't miss 2 episodes of World's Wildest Weather. Then at 3, World's Deadliest Weather.
Welcome back to Weekend Recharge. We're tracking yet another tropical storm. This one back in the Gulf of Mexico, where we already had 3 hurricanes make landfall this season. And this one also making eyes on the Texas coast. But currently, look at the weather extending into Louisiana, parts of coastal Mississippi, and even Alabama. Dauphin Island, the rain you're seeing is associated with Tropical Storm Beta. You're thinking, what's up with the name Beta? Well, we have exhausted the usual list of hurricane names. When you do that in a given year, you go to the Greek alphabet. By the way, this is the second time this has ever happened, the first time back in 2005, so we're still making history. The bad news is the forecast has this moving on towards and onto the Texas coast as we head into this coming week here. Forecast is for this to become a hurricane, perhaps over the next 24 to maybe 36 hours. Category 1 hurricane, but that could change. But bottom line is impacts. Rain right now, rain tomorrow, rain for the next several days, impacting Texas and Louisiana. Melissa?
Yeah, this is going to be a marathon one, so buckle up. It's going to be a while that we'll be tracking Tropical Storm Beta. Well, America's Science Lab Saturday School's now in session. Every Saturday at this time, we're teaching some weather science at home with our families and sharing it with you and your family. Today, our Jen Carfagno teaches us about the type of pressure associated with a hurricane.
So we've been talking a lot about hurricanes. And in a hurricane, what is the center of the hurricane called, Natalie?
The eye.
The eye. Kelly, what kind of pressure is there inside the eye?
Low pressure.
Low pressure. What direction does air move?
From high pressure to low pressure.
From high pressure to low pressure. And we've done a lot of experiments that can show that. This is a really neat one, though, that we can do today that shows how strong the air is, how it can push water just because of a change in pressure. Are you guys ready?
Yeah, let's get started.
You just need a couple of ingredients. You need some birthday candles, a plate with a little bit of clay on it, a little bit of water, and a glass cup. We just put a little bit of clay on top of our plate, and that's to hold our candle. Now you can set that in there. And Kelly, you're going to pour some water around the candle.
How much?
You can fill up the plate. All right, so next we just light the candle and have that glass ready, Kelly, because we're going to place the glass on top, upside down, of the candle, setting it in the water. All right, so let's watch this closely. The water is rising in the glass.
That's so cool.
Oh, wow. Inside the glass, we've created just a little bit of low pressure. Not a lot, but it doesn't have to be a lot. And so that amount of pressure change allowed high pressure outside to force the water to go up in the glass.
That's cool.
The power of pressure.
Hands-on learning. You can do that with your 4-year-old. You can do that with your 60-year-old parent. Yeah, take your seats. Saturday school is in session at the Weather Channel. We want students of all ages to send us a video with your weather science questions. We're going to answer some of them right here on air each weekend. All right, and very in tune with what we're talking about so much this weekend, hurricanes. And Dr. Postel, we're not just tracking Tropical Storm Beta, which is going to impact the U.S., but Hurricane Teddy out in the Atlantic will also pose some risks because of how large it is and what it's going to do to the waters of the Atlantic.
Yeah, it's going to produce some big waves, no doubt about that, and it is already doing that. The Atlantic has some pretty rough seas way out there. The big waves along the coastal parts of the mid-Atlantic are associated more with a gradient wind around high pressure over Canada, with the northeast wind bringing some of that coastal flooding already. But later on this weekend into next week, everybody will see the influence more pronounced, I guess, maybe that's the way to put it, from Hurricane Teddy, because Hurricane Teddy is going to be continuing to move northward and actually get pretty close to Bermuda over the next few days. Right now, Teddy is a Category 3 hurricane expected to move fairly close to Bermuda, but probably to the east of Bermuda by a little bit. Certainly enough in this forecast to keep the core of it well offshore, but certainly bring some gusty winds and some showers and unsettled weather to Bermuda, let's say by early Monday, with actually a pretty significant hurricane not that far away at 105 miles per hour, according to the Hurricane Center. So keep an eye on this one, because a little bit of a wiggle to the west could bring much worse weather, certainly to Bermuda. And then we have to talk about what happens down the road, because Teddy, whatever form it is in by, say, early Tuesday or Wednesday, may be bringing some pretty bad weather to Nova Scotia and also perhaps even down East Maine. This is indeed a real possibility that either Hurricane Teddy or some kind of transitioning giant area of low pressure will bring a lot of rain and a lot of wind to the Canadian Maritimes and even eastern Maine early week. We'll be right back.
Looks like.
Just days after Sally crashed onto the shores of the Gulf Coast, the typically calm and tranquil Gulf is angry once again. Hurricane watches and tropical storm warnings are up along the Texas coast as our 10th named storm just this month swirls offshore. Houston in the cone for this potentially dangerous storm. Head on Weekend Recharge, what you need to know to get prepared for Tropical Storm Beta.
And thousands forced to evacuate as wildfires ravage the west. Now, some people can't return home to survey the damage. The new danger emerging after the flames have been put out. Good afternoon and welcome to Weekend Recharge on this last weekend of summer. I'm Paul Goodlow, along with Melissa Nord in the studio, as well as our storm specialist, Dr. Greg Postel, standing by in the lab. And I tell you what, this 2020 hurricane season continues to make records now. It's one definitely for the record books. We have used up all our normal names on the normal list. Now we've gone to the Greek alphabet, and we've seen Alpha, and now we're also tracking Beta. And Beta forecast to become yet another hurricane, most likely is going to impact Texas as well. We're going to talk about that. But all this is days after Hurricane Laura devastated portions of the Alabama and Florida coastline. Beta is going to bring some heavy rain, flooding, even life-threatening storm surge. And Dr. Greg Postel is tracking that and also many other things we're watching currently in the tropics.
Yeah, Paul, it just won't quit. I mean, we've got a couple of tropical systems close to home. One of those is Tropical Storm Beta, which is right here in the Gulf of Mexico. That is already bringing some impacts to coastal Louisiana and even areas as far north as New Orleans and parts of coastal Alabama and Mississippi. But there's another significant tropical cyclone out there. That is Hurricane Teddy, and that is way over there out in the Atlantic. And I'm going to step over here and show you what they look like in our sort of regional view with all kinds of stuff circled out there. Pretty much everything you can think of has our eye, right? There's two of them in particular, though. There is Tropical Storm Beta and there is Hurricane Teddy. Each one of these could pose a risk and bring some impacts to the United States. Of course, Beta almost certainly, and Teddy might even do that to Maine, for example. Yes, 120-mile-per-hour Category 3 hurricane. It will weaken with time as it moves northward, but it might, let's say, early next week, bring some showers and gusty winds to parts of Maine. And then, of course, Melissa, we have Tropical Storm Beta, which is going to be a problem for us for many days yet to come. You'll have more on that.
Yeah, and this one is moving very slow, 3 miles per hour right now, and that's where we want to begin this morning with Tropical Storm Beta. The Texas and Louisiana coastlines are on high alert as Beta slowly churns in the Gulf of Mexico, and it will be strengthening as it approaches the coast of Texas with dangerous surf. And, you know, I think one of the biggest threats with this one is going to end up being torrential rain because of how slowly this thing moves. It's essentially just going to be crawling along the coastline for about a 4 or 5 day stretch and really not moving very quickly. So let's talk about the latest. This is the latest advisory from the National Hurricane Center, moving to the north-northwest at just 3 miles per hour. Yeah, does that remind you of a storm from last week, Sally? It does, because that Sally was also moving at just 3 miles per hour for a while. All right, so we now have tropical storm warnings up from Port Aransas all the way to Intracoastal City, Louisiana. So these places could potentially see tomorrow tropical storm force conditions. And even outside of that, we're going to still see some gusty winds. We also have a hurricane watch for the central Texas coastline as well. So let's show you the latest track from the Hurricane Center. And again, right now it's a 60-mile-per-hour maximum sustained winds tropical storm, but it has started the shift from moving northward to moving westward. And as it continues on that westward track, it's over very warm ocean waters, and it will potentially be able to strengthen into a low-end Category 1 hurricane. Now, regardless of category, hurricane versus tropical storm, one of the biggest threats with this one, because look, this is Wednesday. It's still near Houston. Between now and Wednesday, we're dealing with tropical rains right along the coastline. So it's going to be the rain threat that I think is going to be a huge deal for a lot of people because of how long this thing's going to be meandering around. So right now, over the weekend so far, we've had these steering currents that are very weak, and they're going to stay very weak, Paul, and this threat with heavy rain could give some places big-time rain totals that maybe saw big-time rain totals earlier this season with another tropical storm.
Yeah, we're talking about Hannah because, yeah, flashback to July. Still, anytime you have a tropical system threat in Texas, it's a flashback concern with people in Texas. The state's still waterlogged from Hurricane Hannah. That storm hammered parts of the state with more than 2 feet of rain. Another massive rainfall and flooding event could prove disastrous. And then you have the pandemic going on as well. Let's bring back in Dr. Postel to talk about the track of this and the impacts. And just like Sally, Dr. Postel, this thing is not moving very fast at all. 3 miles per hour is a healthy walking pace.
Right, and that's the problem because it's going to prolong the impacts for many of us along the Texas coast and areas even in Louisiana where right now, even though as the crow flies, the center of Beta is a couple hundred miles offshore, we're getting a lot of rain in coastal Louisiana and New Orleans, gusting almost 30 miles per hour with a lot of thunderstorm activity lurking just offshore, even getting some rain reports across parts of Alabama. Yeah. Alabama as well from Beta, which is a long way away. But at the bottom left part of your screen, you might see underneath that banner, there's a lot of lightning strikes going on. Let's have a look in there because there's some developments here over the recent few hours which are noteworthy. There's a center of low pressure. You can see the swirl at the beginning part of this loop right there. It's kind of been drawn underneath an area of convection or big thunderstorms. Now, that's normal, and you could expect that with a system like this over warm water and over the environment atmospherically that it's in. But if these thunderstorms last, let's say, a bit longer than 6 hours or so, then the pressure could actually respond noticeably. Yeah, it'll fluctuate a little bit, but it could really begin to drop, and then the winds really increase depending on how durable those thunderstorms are. We just have to wait and see what happens and wait for the next hurricane reconnaissance mission to go in there to find out exactly how it's evolving today. But do expect it to strengthen eventually to a hurricane. Right now, there is an upper trough, but it is moving away and weakening. A little bit of a dip in the jet stream has allowed some of the tilt in the storm, the asymmetry. In other words, most of the bad weather still is well off to the north and east of where the center of low circulation is, which is right there. That is associated with the wind shear, and that's what's happening right now. But that wind shear will relax a little bit, and the stronger winds aloft will back off and move to the north and allow Beta to kind of drift around across parts of the western Gulf of Mexico, if not onshore, which is a problem in its own right. But by early Monday, not much steering to push it away. It's going to be sticking and wobbling around across many of the same areas, bringing in rain, gusty winds, and coastal flooding. So we have all those hazards to deal with for a prolonged period based on the slow movement of Beta. And overall, this is what we've got with Beta, with a lot of rain, Paul, yet to come. Back to you.
Yeah, big concern now. Take a live look right now in South Padre Island, Texas. Yeah, seeing a little haze out there, but also notice the surf. Kind of agitated here. Lots of whitecaps out there, or dealing with some waves. And we have high surf advisories in place for South Padre Island, Texas. Tropical storm Beta, as it approaches the coast, it's going to slowly strengthen, which means more surf, more flood threats along the coast, not to mention inland heavy rain and freshwater flooding concerns as well. As Dr. Purcell mentioned, we're seeing now convection right around the center, but we've been seeing convection rain well to the east and northeast of that center, which has brought plenty of rain across areas of Louisiana, coastal Mississippi, even Dauphin Island, Alabama saw some rain. New Orleans seeing more rain now than they did with Sally. Look at all the rain to come, though, pushing on towards New Orleans, but eventually it pushes westward into Texas, including Houston, Victoria, Palacios, all going to see some rain on this, perhaps some heavy rain. That just goes through Tuesday. We'll see that rain perhaps through Thursday. European model now has been kind of pushing this on shore. The official track for the Hurricane Center also pushes the center on shore. But remember, there's weather even well off the center, and that weather is going to be rain even towards College Station, Brenham, Bryan, even Austin will see some rain. The Hill Country, San Antonio, you can flood easily too. That's going to be an issue there. But also Houston, days and days of rain. Wednesday, we still have rain falling, and eventually more rain pushes on towards Cameron Parish as well. Inland flood threat, coastal flood threat. It continues to be an ongoing thing. This is just through Monday, but I expect this to continue well into the end of next week as well. You can see the winds also an issue, especially close to that core and by the coast as well, with the winds coming in without the reduced by friction. But we do expect the winds to come close to being on shore late tomorrow night, but definitely by Monday, we see those tropical storm force wind gusts hit the coast. Not to mention waves. Strong waves will be generated and then moving onshore as tropical storm, maybe Hurricane Beta approaches as we head on through the rest of this weekend and into next week. Melissa?
Yeah, and with Beta expected to become a hurricane, now is really the time to be prepared. Meteorologist Kelly Cass walks us through some of the essentials that you need to get ready for the next storm.
Hurricane preparedness can save your life. By having a few items on hand in advance, you can make a hurricane survival kit. First, get a plastic tub or large container that can also fit in your car in case you have to evacuate. Get plenty of non-perishable foods. Make sure you have a 3-day supply for evacuation, 2-week supply for home. You will need bottled water, at least a gallon per person per day. Have an updated first aid kit on hand. And pack LED flashlights, and don't forget the fresh batteries. Have your cell phones charged, and if you can, bring an extra charger. And make sure you go to an ATM in advance to grab some cash. If the power is out, you won't be able to use your debit or credit card. Having a small gas container will come in handy if you run low on fuel for your vehicle, or if you have a generator. If you do decide to run a generator, please do not run it inside your house. Generators emit a deadly amount of carbon monoxide. When finding a position for your generator, it is crucial that the area is dry, well ventilated, level, and away from your home.
And that reminder about generators is so important. We saw, unfortunately, several deaths after Laura from people who didn't have their well ventilated. Well, Beta is not the only storm that we are keeping an eye on. Hurricane Teddy, it is forecast to move east of Bermuda late Sunday night into Monday. Yes, it looks pretty nice out there right now, but it's going to make for some large waves and even swells along the East Coast. So let's talk a little bit more about Teddy, which is our Category 3 hurricane, still well out in the Atlantic. Right now, it's still about 560 miles away from Bermuda. But you'll notice Teddy is right there and Bermuda right in here. So we're noticing that it is moving at a pretty good clip. It is moving at 14 miles per hour, so it'll be a quick pass by to the east, but nonetheless could potentially bring some tropical storm conditions coming less than 2 weeks after Paulette moved over the island of Bermuda. Okay, so here's the newest track from the National Hurricane Center. You notice the center of the storm, yes, may pass by to the east, but Bermuda could certainly see some large waves, tropical storm force conditions. And then look at the track beyond that. This thing keeps moving north. Now, it may stay a hurricane. It may develop some extratropical characteristics where it's not a pure tropical system. But regardless, this thing is going to bring some gusty winds, really big rain amounts to parts of Nova Scotia and also Newfoundland. And if it's on the western side of that cone, we could be talking about some impacts as well to eastern Maine. So that's something we're watching for the eastern Maine as we head into about Tuesday. Now, as Teddy approaches and it's way out in the Atlantic, that in combination with strong northeasterly winds is actually creating some hazards along the coast. Paul, we still have a high risk of rip currents all the way from Cape Cod down through the Outer Banks of North Carolina today, and that rip current risk, large swell risk, it's going to last all the way into early next week.
It will. Well, let's go now from the East Coast to the West Coast right now, and it's all about the smoke and the fires here. Incredible pictures with fires in Oregon. Smoke from these wildfires coloring the skies above Gaston. This year has been one of the toughest on record for not only Oregon, but also in California. Right now, more than 17,000 firefighters are deployed at 26 active fires just across the state of California, making this one of the worst fire seasons in history in that state. Red flood warning is still flying out towards the west, but you might think, hey, did we have rain? We had some rain, Northern California, Oregon, Washington, but not really a lot of beneficial rain in the interior. Hence, the fire danger is still elevated across much of the west. And then to make matters worse, the front coming through has now kind of cranked down the winds. Some of those winds downsloping, so they're warming up and heating up and drying out. That's the main thing. Dry, hot winds coming through, which can fan the flames across the region. We'll see the winds die down a little bit overnight, but then pick back up throughout tomorrow. So the wind and dryness continues, which is a bad combination when you have the wildfires burning. Not to mention the air quality, pretty poor because of all the smoke in the air. In fact, we're modeling some of the smoke moving all across the west, seeing the smoke now even to the east coast of the U.S., all because of the atmospheric conditions moving west to east, bringing that smoke all across the region, making air quality pretty poor across the region. Immediate coastlines are a little bit better with that onshore flow across the area. Okay, can we see any more rain? Well, the forecast is perhaps the Pacific Northwest seeing some scattered showers as we head over the next week, and beneficial soaking rain moving into western areas of Washington, although we need a lot more as we head later into the season of fall, which or last week in the fall will become better. But right now this year, well, it's starting to creep up on some of the worst fire years in record. And by the way, many of them have been just in this 21st century. Melissa?
Thanks so much, Paul. Well, still ahead on Weekend Recharge, is there a way to stop the rise in billion-dollar disasters? Our hurricane expert, Dr. Rick Knabb, weighs in the midst of a tough tropical season. And we're looking live to New Orleans, which is getting rain and gusty winds as we track Tropical Storm Beta in the Gulf of Mexico.
Starting at 1, don't miss 2 episodes of World's Wildest Weather. Then at 3, World's Deadliest Weather.
hurricane season doesn't stop for a pandemic, and neither do we.
From this point forward, conditions will continue to deteriorate.
Don't let COVID-19 take your eye off the tropics. This year's threat is more complex and dangerous than ever before.
Remain vigilant, pay close attention to the Weather Channel.
No one can cover this historic hurricane season better than the Weather Channel. Get the information you need to stay safe every day. Storm safety in a pandemic, all season long, right here on the Weather Channel.
Okay, breathe deeply. Can you smell it? Yes, it's a scent of pumpkin spice in the air, as well as candy corn. That's right. A lot of people have a love-hate with candy corn. I kind of like it. But anyway, it's starting to smell and taste like fall here the last weekend of summer. Yes, and feeling like fall as well. Chicago, sun's been up for a little while, 57 degrees. That's it. Atlanta, only 69. Got some clouds out there, but I tell you what, normally this time of the day, at noon, you should be closing in at 90, but we will not get higher than the mid-70s today. Definitely kind of a taste of fall here, and it's going to stick around, not just Atlanta or Chicago. Look at the Northeast, currently 60 right now in New York City, and it's noon. Lunchtime in Pittsburgh, 55 degrees. Detroit, 57 degrees. And yes, a little dip in our jet stream, allowing the cooler air to push southward behind the cold front that pushed on through. There's also dropped our humidity as well. It's that dry air that really cools down when you lose that sun. And by the way, I guess fall starts on Tuesday, so that's when we start seeing equal day, equal night for a moment. Then the nights get longer than the days, so we're losing all those hours of daylight we enjoy this summer, which allows us to cool off quickly. That also impacts our weather. So today, the next couple of days, temperatures cooling down below average across the East Coast. That continues, talking 5, 10, 15 degrees below average. Our heat wave is over. In contrast, this time last year, Atlanta in a stretch of mid-90s. Now we're in maybe mid-70s. Much of the eastern seaboard enjoying the cooler, drier air. Rain will be kept at bay, so you see these cooler winds coming in, drier winds as well. Look at the next couple of days in Atlanta. Average is low 80s. We're at low 70s, and yeah, sunshine, not constant cloud cover. That's with some sun, that dry air. Again, morning lows in the 50s. Just up to enjoy the fresh air. If you don't suffer from allergies, open up the windows and enjoy. Hey, talk about some really cold. What about freezing weather? Yeah, our forecast the next by Monday morning in Caribou, 28 degrees, down to freezing in Binghamton. Even the Cuse in Rochester, mid-30s, and some of those temperatures will be threatening record low temperatures as well. Now, the outlook as we head on towards the last couple of days of September, we're still calling for the southeast to be below average, but much of the rest of the nation still trending at or above average in terms of temperatures. Melissa?
Thanks so much, Paul. Well, this hurricane season has definitely been so 2020. Listen to this. We've had 4 landfalling tropical systems in just the last 6 weeks. There are some years we don't even see 4 landfalling tropical systems ever. Now, there was Hurricane Isaias in North Carolina back on August 3rd. Fast forward to August 25th, we had Tropical Storm Marco at the mouth of the Mississippi. 2 days later, Laura made landfall in Cameron, Louisiana as a Cat 4. And then this week, another hit for the Gulf Coast as Sally made landfall near Gulf Shores, Alabama as a Category 2. Now, the damage caused by those storms is extensive, but will they be added to the list of billion-dollar disasters this year? Our hurricane expert, Dr. Rick Knabb, discussed the possibility and ways to prevent future disasters last night on Woo TV with our Mike Bettis and Jackie Jarris.
Now, recovering from these billion-dollar disasters, it can take, we know, years. 3 years after Hurricane Maria struck Puerto Rico, more than 20,000 people still homeless. The Trump administration approved a nearly $13 billion grant to help rebuild the electrical grid and schools that were damaged in the wake of Maria. Bringing back in Jackie, our hurricane expert, Dr. Rick Knabb. And a lot of people would say, you know, when it comes to infrastructure in this country, we're spending our money in all the wrong places. But you talk about today's announcement, Dr. Knabb. They're going to reinforce the electrical grid, reinforce schools here. This has got to be a step in the right direction because it doesn't seem like we're doing enough to mitigate natural disasters in this country.
Right. It's about building back better and not just repeating the cycle of build, destroy, build back the way it was. You know, and there's 2 major areas in which we can do better. That is, be careful about where we build in the first place and then how strong we build.
And what about existing places, Dr. Knabb? Does it make sense to reinforce or build up some of the infrastructure that we already have?
Sure, and there's been some recent surveys of the American public, and there is a widespread support for paying for making our infrastructure stronger, paying for moving some communities that want to go out of repetitive flood loss locations. And there's been a little bit of money that has been added to the federal budget to increase mitigation spending at the local and state level, but it's a tiny amount compared to what these disasters cost.
Yeah, it's alarming when you think about it. You think about over the course of decades, our society has advanced so much, but the cost and the number of people dying from natural disasters keeps going up decade by decade.
Yeah, we're still more reactive than we are proactive.
And we're in the time of climate change as well.
And now we're still watching Tropical Storm Beta. Is it forecast to become a hurricane? If so, how strong will it be? What about the impacts with this system we're seeing now? And what's going to happen along parts of Texas and Louisiana, southwest Louisiana, still trying to recover from Hurricane Laura? We got a lot of questions, and we got some answers for you coming up on Weekend Recharge. Yeah, we're talking about Beta, but what about Alpha? Well, subtropical storm Alpha brought this. Actually, no, I stand corrected. This is a Medicane, rare Greek Mediterranean storm that came on through here, bringing some rough weather in this area of Greece this week. A cyclone blew into this part of the Mediterranean with heavy rain and winds yesterday. One man who lives in the western part of the country says he's never seen weather this bad in the nearly 4 decades he's lived on this island during this time of the year. All right, now back on towards the Atlantic we go, and take a live look at Houston on the left side of your screen. Sunshine, 80 degrees. New Orleans, rain and 73. Both, watching to see what's going to happen with the Tropical Storm Beta as it's slowly making its way through the region there, unleashing some heavy rainfall, coastal flooding. Watches are up, even warnings for portions of the Texas coast, and watches up for areas of Louisiana as well. And the area still recovering from Hurricane Laura also will see impacts from this Tropical Storm Beta, which is forecast to become a hurricane. Let's get to our storm specialist, Dr. Greg Postel, with the very latest on Tropical Storm Beta.
Paul, thank you very much. I mean, there's a lot of heavy rain, as you saw in that tower cam from New Orleans, moving in already across parts of southern Louisiana. Look at all this heavy rain right in there. Showers and thunderstorms coming in off the Gulf, whereas the center, of Beta is all the way over there, a couple of 100 miles away. That's how big this system is right now, and its impacts are spread pretty far and wide. Let's have a look at, though, once again, some of the current conditions in and around the Houston, Texas area, where the weather actually not really that bad. Mostly sunny skies, temperatures are in the 80s, and most of the Texas coastline is like that today, even though later on, earlier next week, we do expect the weather conditions to get much worse with the approach of at least Tropical Storm Beta, which may become a hurricane by then. Right now, the winds are 60 miles per hour, but it's moving slowly, a couple miles per hour, and is probably going to be gaining strength over the next couple of days. Let's have a look at the cone, because this is a real trick, and this is why I said the weather is going to get worse across parts of Texas over the next couple of days, because there's Beta and is moving westward, perhaps as a hurricane, closing in on the Texas Gulf Coast early next week, and then only slowly moving or parallel to the coast by midweek. We may still be talking about Beta the end of this upcoming week, like Thursday or Friday, with impacts all across parts of the northern Gulf Coast. Melissa.
Yeah, a lot to watch, and we got some new video in of the rain coming down in New Orleans today. This is from those outer bands from Tropical Storm Beta swirling 280 miles offshore. Now, rain is expected to continue well into the week as Beta grows stronger, and we've also got a coastal flood advisory in effect for southeastern Louisiana all along the coast. And when you look at the radar presentation and where all the thunderstorm clusters are with Beta, it's all confined north and east of the center of circulation. And you'll notice on the radar, look at all the rain that right now is happening over southeastern Louisiana. So as we look at the track, it's going to be a marathon. This is not a quick storm and we're done. So with the impacts, with it slowly meandering around the coast and getting steered one way and then the other, rainfall is going to be one of the biggest impacts with this one. Look at some of these rain totals that could be still to come. We're talking about some spots that could see 3 to 5 inches, but then along the coast, as Beta slowly moves along the coast, we could be talking about 5 to 8 inches locally higher. Now, if that track shifts a little further west along the Texas coast, The places you notice over the water that are red, that's where we could see 8 to 12 inches. Maybe that shifts even closer to the coast. So there's still a lot of uncertainties with the amount of rain that we end up getting. But Dr. Postel, uncertainty, I think, is the name of the game in terms of the track because the steering currents are so weak with this storm.
Yeah, it's going to be wobbling around the western Gulf of Mexico for the next couple of days over, by the way, some relatively warm water that is deep and warm as well. So we have a lot of ocean heat content available for Beta to access and potentially get a lot stronger. Right now, we've got a lot of rain and thunderstorms closing in and moving through parts of the northern Gulf Coast. Very heavy rain and torrential rain and cloud to ground lightning as well, cloud to ocean lightning for now. But some of that stormy weather will be moving farther inland in Louisiana and Alabama today and Mississippi, even though the center of Beta is all the way over here, like 300 miles away from where that batch of heaviest rain is. But look at what we've got over the center. This is where the lowest pressure is with Beta, and we're seeing a flare-up of thunderstorms. If this continues in this way, right over the center of circulation, we will see the pressures drop later on this afternoon and the winds pick up thereafter. So it might be on its way to strengthening if those thunderstorms are indeed durable. Right now, across the northern Gulf of Mexico, the weather, aside from the rain in coastal Louisiana, is really not all that bad. But it is going to be the rain that is going to be significant, especially if Beta stalls out along the Texas and northern Gulf Coast, like some of the models suggest, through much of next week. We'll be right back.
Get your daily dose of everything weather.
Wow! Boy, do we have a lot to talk about.
Weather Today from the Weather Channel. New episodes every day, only on Quibi.
Let's head out west now, where wildfires are still burning. A firefighter was killed this week while battling the El Dorado fire. The blaze is burning more than 22,000 acres across 70 miles east of Los Angeles. More than 1,200 firefighters are fighting this fire in Angeles Oaks. Now in Oregon, rain is bringing relief to fires, but residents in Northwest Oregon are on alert for possible flash flooding and landslides. It's all due to the heavy rain forecast for areas that were burned by the Riverside, Beachy Creek, and Lions Head fires. Wildfires have burned nearly 1 million acres in the state of Oregon. And as wildfires rage in the west, families are in limbo. They don't know when they can return to their homes, not knowing if their homes are even standing. Our Justin Michaels spent the time with those waiting to find out what's next.
Frustrations are growing at the Lakeside Market in Oroville, California.
It's just, we don't know what to do, you know?
This place is now the base of operations for hundreds waiting to get back to Berry Creek, a small mountain town of 1,200 nearly leveled by the North Complex fire last Tuesday.
So yeah, it's frustrating not even be able to go look.
Police are stopping everyone, including residents.
We don't know if we need a motel for a couple days or if it's going to be a couple weeks or a month.
It wouldn't do anyone any good to go into an unsafe situation.
As stressful as it may be, CAL FIRE says keeping people away is an important part of the recovery process for now.
The fire front may have moved on, but it takes a long time for the material to finish burning out.
Making streets like these incredibly dangerous. As flare-ups are still possible, utilities need to be deemed safe, and hotspots need to be put out. We see it time and time again covering wildfires in California, how the fire almost discriminates against some houses. Here in this residential section of Berry Creek, California, you can see house after house, car after car, property after property, completely laid to waste by the flames. With the exception of the neighbor at the end of the street, it's almost as if their house wasn't even touched. Of the more than 1,100 structures destroyed, more than 700 were homes, including that of Donald Wise.
I just moved my stuff last month.
Now, we all talk about how bad 2020 has been. Well, for Donald, it can't get much worse.
Yeah, so pretty much lost everything.
Including his wife, earlier this year.
She passed away in June from cancer.
A man dealing with 2 impossible situations in 3 months.
It's hard to have any emotion, really. It's just like kind of numb, you know, at what's been happening.
Getting back to Berry Creek has more meaning to Donald than possibly anyone else who called this mountain home. He's looking for just one thing.
I know the ashes of my wife are, you know, I mean, that's just not going to survive. It's just going to be mixing with the rest. So that would be the main thing, is try to get her out there, because we were supposed to take her back to Hawaii, and we're going to spread our ashes back in Hawaii. So
a reality Donald knows will likely never happen. Just one more unthinkable story of tragedy from the California wildfires.
It's just like kind of a numb feeling, like, all right, what's next?
In Oroville, California, Justin Michaels, The Weather Channel.
Need more rain out there. Not seeing much. We saw some in the Pacific Northwest the last couple of days. We have more on the way, but need a lot more throughout the West. That's coming, though, as we head deeper in the fall. Red flood warnings are flying out here. We do have still an elevated fire risk across the region because it's so hot and dry. The cold front definitely brought some moisture to the Northwest. What we don't have is a lot of that moisture pushing really too far to the east, which means Pacific Northwest, that's great for you, but we need it in Intermountain West, Southwest as well. The fronts sometimes come through. When they lose their moisture, they increase the wind. They have downsloping wind down from the higher elevations, lower elevations, which heats up the air, but also dries it out, as well as makes some gusty winds as well, which is not good weather conditions when you have wildfires burning, and many are still out of control as well. So a concern is, yes, this continues to spread, not only the flames, but also the smoke as well. The air quality pretty poor across much of the northern Rockies and pushing into the plains. In fact, some of the smoke has been seen all the way on towards the East Coast. So what happens in the West is not just staying in the West. At least that smoke now is pushing across all of the lower 48 states. We've noticed it the last couple of weeks as well. Okay, any relief? Yes, Northwest, I said, even more rain on the way near. Perhaps the northern Rockies seeing some, perhaps some snow in the higher elevations. We'll see more and more intrusions of fronts as we head deeper into fall. Again, fall begins on Tuesday. But look at the acreage now. This year, 2020 top line, over 7 million acres have burned. And that's starting to get close to some of the record years, like back 5 years ago in 2015, over 8.8 million acres of burned. But we need some rain as we head deeper into fall and winter. That is the rainy season. Hopefully we'll have more moisture this year than we did last year. Well, stick around. We're still watching what's going on in the tropics, as well as it's time for a little education for the kiddos out there. Yeah, get them up. Saturday school is in session. The common household items you can use to teach kids about how pressure powers a hurricane.
Don't miss 2 episodes of World's Wildest Weather. Then at 3, World's Deadliest Weather.
Welcome back to Weekend Recharge. We're still tracking Tropical Storm Beta in the Gulf of Mexico. It's forecast to become a hurricane and also forecast to make landfall. Yet perhaps the next potential hurricane, 4th of the season to make landfall. Right now, the impacts, well, they extend well away from the center to the east-northeast now. That's rain now moving across southeast Louisiana, New Orleans. A rainy Saturday morning for you. Even rain in Dauphin Island, Alabama, coastal Mississippi as well. Here's the track. The National Hurricane Center does have this making landfall as a hurricane, perhaps late Monday, early Tuesday. on the Texas coastline between Corpus and Houston, perhaps closer to Port Lavaca or even Palacios, Texas. This forecast could change. It's been changing today. Bottom line, impacts, rain, coastal flooding, inland flooding. We'll see rain even up through the I-35, I-45 corridors, perhaps even as far north as I-20. So be prepared for your changing weather across Texas, Louisiana over the next 4 to 5 days with this system. Melissa?
That's certainly going to be a marathon, a lot to talk about in the coming days with Beta. Well, America's Science Lab Saturday School is now, you hear the bell ring? It's in session. Every Saturday at this time, we're teaching some weather science at home with our families and sharing it with you and your family. Today, our Jen Carfagno teaches us about the pressure associated with a hurricane.
So we've been talking a lot about hurricanes, and in a hurricane, what is the center of the hurricane called, Natalie?
The eye.
The eye. Kelly, what kind of pressure is there inside the eye?
Low pressure.
Low pressure. What direction does air move?
From high pressure to low pressure.
From high pressure to low pressure. And we've done a lot of experiments that can show that. This is a really neat one, though, that we can do today that shows how strong the air is, how it can push water just because of a change in pressure. Are you guys ready?
Yeah, let's get started.
You just need a couple of ingredients. You need some birthday candles, a plate with a little bit of clay on it, a little bit of water, and a glass cup. We just put a little bit of clay on top of our plate, and that's to hold our candle. Now you can set that in there. And Kelly, you're going to pour some water around the candle.
How much?
You can fill up the plate. All right, so next we just light the candle and have that glass ready, Kelly, because we're going to place the glass on top, upside down, of the candle, setting it in the water. All right, so let's watch this closely. The water is rising in the glass.
That's so cool.
Oh, wow. Inside the glass, we've created just a little bit of low pressure. Not a lot, but it doesn't have to be a lot. And so that amount of pressure change allowed high pressure outside to force the water to go up in the glass.
That's cool.
The power of pressure.
Well, take your seats. Saturday School is in session on the Weather Channel. We want students of all ages, 0, 1, all the way up through 60, 70, 80. Send us your video with your weather questions, and we will answer some of them right here on air. And how appropriate, we're talking about hurricane pressure this week on Science Lab, because Dr. Postel, we've got not only Beta, but Hurricane Teddy churning out in the Atlantic.
We do, and as you pointed out, it's already making some big waves out there, literally and figuratively. That would be Hurricane Teddy right about there. So right now, not anywhere close to land, but it will get pretty close to Bermuda, we think, as a strong hurricane, maybe not as strong as it is now. It's 120 mile per hour Cat 3 out there, but it does appear to have some signs that perhaps it's weakening a little bit, and that is expected in the future forecast. You can see that according to the Hurricane Center forecast, it will likely move east of Bermuda, the center will, and as it does, it will probably still be a strong hurricane, perhaps a Category 2, but probably still close enough to provide some impacts with some gusty winds and maybe some bad weather, some showers as well. So that's something to watch for those interested in Bermuda, because a little wobble to the west and we could be dealing with an entirely different scenario for Bermuda. But right now it looks manageable. Northward from there, though, it's going to move very likely in the Canadian Maritimes and potentially as a hurricane. We'll see. Sometimes as these things get farther north and they interact with the jet stream, they don't carry or preserve their tropical characteristics. Instead, they turn into these giant areas of low pressure, bigger, no doubt about that, but not as intense in the middle of it. So we'll see indeed how early next week Teddy, or what becomes of Teddy, its post-tropical transition, how that impacts, let's say, Nova Scotia and maybe even down East Maine with some gusty winds and some rainfall all the way through, let's say, early Wednesday. But aside from that, we are also dealing with this tropical storm, Beta, in the Gulf of Mexico. We'll talk much more about this, and I want everybody along the northern Gulf Coast to pay attention to the forecast updates on Hurricane Beta. We'll have one coming up after the break. Welcome back. We have one more thing, and that is Tropical Storm Beta in the Gulf of Mexico. There it is, Tropical Storm Beta as a 60-mile-per-hour tropical storm. We will get an update from the National Hurricane Center later on this afternoon. Right now, it is not moving much at all at 3 miles per hour, and even right now, bringing some heavy rain and some thunderstorms to parts of the northern Gulf Coast already, even though the center is a couple of 100 miles away. That's the scope of it right now. And is it expected to move still slowly over the next 24 to 48 hours on a path eventually westward like this? So Beta will move essentially like that and get closer and closer, we think, to the Texas Gulf Coast and gradually bring the bad weather with it. Notice that the official intensity forecast from the Hurricane Center has it getting to hurricane strength. And then depending on exactly where Beta goes, whether or not it's just inland or remains offshore, that will help us determine how strong it remains. And that forecast remains to be seen. There's still a lot of uncertainty left. The bottom line is that, let's say, residents all the way from Brownsville through New Orleans and even areas in coastal Mississippi and Alabama follow the latest updates on Tropical Storm Beta, because indeed, later on in the week, it may even be moving toward the west and impact areas outside of this cone directly. So pay attention to the updates on Beta. There will very likely be a lot of rain, a couple of inches at least. Our forecast models suggest perhaps as much as 5 to 8 in some spots, and certainly 3 to 5 in many areas surrounding that. So a lot of rain is yet to come, very likely with Beta, even regardless of exactly how far inland it gets. There is more in the tropics. In the tropical Atlantic is still very busy, and we have a whole lot of things here. But let's get to now Hurricane Teddy. That is Hurricane Teddy, nowhere near land right now, but it may indeed come reasonably close to Bermuda, which is right here, by the way. Right now, Teddy is 120-mile-per-hour Category 3, probably weakening as we speak, and will probably continue to weaken all the way through its life cycle, because there's Bermuda right there, and the official forecast has Teddy passing likely to the east of Bermuda, bringing some impactful weather early week, and then northward from there, very likely as a weakening hurricane, perhaps even transitioning into a giant area of low pressure with wind and rain for Nova Scotia, and perhaps even interests in down east Maine. Pay attention to Teddy. Some bad weather may be on the way by midweek. Stay tuned. World's Wildest Weather is up next.